Welcome to Standing for Truth. I am your host, Donnie. And tonight we have Dr. Kent Hovind and Jackson Rowe with us here, who will be debating the important topic: does geology support creation or evolution? Gentlemen, thank you so much for giving us your time for tonight's important debate.
Thank you.
Awesome. This should be fun. And before we get into it, though, to the audience, we will be having an audience Q&A. And so please make sure you are tagging me with your questions at Standing for Truth. That way I won't miss your questions. So tonight's going to be pretty formal, as we are going to be having opening statements. Jackson will be kicking us off with his opening statement, roughly 10 to 12 minutes. Then we're going to have some rebuttals, about 8 minutes, and then just a free-flowing discussion, focusing on one topic at a time and keeping it as equally timed as possible. Then we're going to have 5-minute closings. And then again, that's where we get you guys in the audience involved. So make sure you're tagging me with your questions. Before we get into it, though, as we always do, let's break the ice a little bit. Jackson, Dr. Dino, you both have been here a number of times before, so you don't really need an introduction, but why don't we do one anyways? Jackson, how are you? What's going on over at your channel, and how you been?
I'm doing good. I figured out how to upload videos. Download videos and re-upload them, so my video quality is a little better now on my channel. But also, I'm dressed for the debate, as you can see. Got my Hawaiian shirt on. So
you're dressed to impress, Jackson. Yeah. You look good.
So that's all, really. Just I'm excited for it.
All right, I appreciate it, Jackson. Good to have you again. And Dr. Hovind, good to have you as well. How you been? What's going on over at Dow? And a little bit about yourself.
Well, doing great. God's good. Some of his kids drive me crazy, but my throat's about gone from talking too much. Had a wonderful wedding here today. We have visitors come from all over the place. Come see our dinosaur adventureland in Alabama. Now we've had, I forget how many, 211 baptized now. And Jackson's going to be our next convert. Going to get him baptized here, and after we get him saved. So appreciate you doing this for me, Jackson.
Amen. Amen. I appreciate that, Dr. Hovind. And anybody in the audience, just a reminder, between our both channels, we are just a couple subscribers away from hitting 20,000 subscribers. So please make sure to hit that subscribe button and share around this content as the truth and, of course, critical thinking. is so important. So we're going to hand it now to Jackson. Jackson, the floor is yours. You are muted, so just make sure you unmute yourself. And you've got roughly 12 minutes. So go ahead.
Let me share my screen. Let me pull it up here.
Yeah, whenever you're ready to share your screen, let me know, and we can do so.
You guys hear me?
Yes, I don't see it's sharing just yet though. Just make sure
it's frozen a little bit. It'll come up here in a second. My computer's having some issues.
No worries. There was just a slight echo, Jackson. So while you guys are having your back and forth, if I am, muting you, for example, as Dr. Hovind's talking, it's nothing against you. I'm just doing my best to make sure that the audio is coming in smooth. So no worries. Okay. Whenever your screen share is up and ready to go, I will put it up on screen. If it's frozen, that's fine. I'll give a couple reminders to everybody because next week we'll have Dr. Hovind back here with us. Actually, we put out a challenge video the other day. We uploaded it on my channel, Matt's channel, and Dr. Hovind's channel, and I've been getting swamped with emails. So we've got debates for you probably up until the rapture. Okay, so next week we've got pre-tribulation versus post-tribulation rapture, Dr. Hovind versus Andrew Sluter, Pastor Andrew Sluter. So that should be a ton of fun. And Jackson, the other debater of tonight, will be back here in a few weeks as well, debating the Cambrian explosion, best explained by creation or evolution. Professor David McQueen, retired from ICR, will be debating Jackson Rowe. So again, if you're not subscribed, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. Jackson, I still don't see your screen share coming up, my good man.
Yeah, it's still frozen. Let's give it a minute. So it took 30 minutes for my computer to come up at all tonight, so hopefully that's not how long it takes.
Now, are you having any other issues with your computer other than kind of the screen share?
No, it's just screen share right now. It's not working.
And you gave your computer a good kind of restart and reboot before you started the debate?
Yeah, I did. So let's wait just a minute. Sorry about this.
No, that's okay. That's okay. It happens. As Dr. Hovind says, according to evolution, things are supposed to get better on their own. So I don't know, maybe your computer's accumulated a few deleterious mutations.
Maybe.
Sometimes when that happens to me, Jackson, if I leave the studio and then make my way back in, sometimes that refreshes it.
Okay, let me see if I can do that.
Unless you feel like it'll.
Hang on a second.
Because I know when that's frozen.
Yeah.
Well, as you're figuring that out, I see a ton of questions already coming in from the audience, guys. So I appreciate it. Just make sure you're tagging me with your questions. Again, the format, we're going to have roughly 12-minute opening statements, 8-minute uninterrupted rebuttals, a free-flowing organic discussion, a closing statement, and then an audience Q&A. So I appreciate you guys tagging me with your questions. I see them coming in already. We'll get underway as soon as Jackson here
figures out his computer.
Screen share. Is this the same computer you usually use, Jackson?
Yeah, it is. So I don't know what the deal is today.
Did you want to click Leave Studio? Exit your browser?
It's doing something.
It's evolving.
Yeah.
All right. Well, as you do that, let me know. I'll be able to see it come across on the screen. So until then, we'll do this. And I appreciate your patience, everybody in the audience. Once I see your screen share pop up, we'll be back.
Okay. Are we still on screen?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're still here. We're still here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now the whole thing's frozen. Can you still see my shirt?
Yeah, Jackson, we can see you.
Okay.
We can see you. Oh, Dr. Hovind, I'm sorry. I think you're on mute.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
would it help if I go first? I mean,
Yeah,
really?
maybe that's a good idea.
Okay.
Okay, let's have Dr. Hovind go first. And Jackson, again, I'd recommend leave the studio real quick. Okay, so at the bottom right-hand corner, click Leave Studio, exit your browser, okay, and then restart it. Make your way back in. That'll refresh the system. So as you're doing that, make sure you're listening to Kent's opening statement from your phone. And we're going to have Dr. Hovind start in 3, 2, 1.
Well, thank you for having me on here, Donnie. Good to be back. The debate tonight, does geology support creation or evolution? Well, first, let's define some words. Geo means earth. Ology means the study of. Does the study of the earth support the idea of creation or evolution? And the word evolution is pretty tricky. It's got 6 different meanings: cosmic evolution, chemical evolution, stellar evolution, organic evolution, microevolution, and macroevolution. I think we all agree that variations happen within the same kind. You know, there's lots of different varieties of dogs. That's considered microevolution. It's a bad name for it. Sorry about my voice here. But anything above that's a pure religious belief. And I covered that in video number 4 of my seminar series. People can get the whole thing for $50, 18 hours on science in the Bible. The Bible says in 2 Peter chapter 3, knowing this first, there shall come in the last days scoffers. There are people who scoff at the Bible, like Jackson says. He claims he's an atheist. And the Bible says they'll be walking after their own lust and saying, where's the promise of his coming? Since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were. It's an important phrase here. Peter prophesied that at the end of time, people would say, things are happening now the way they've always been happening for long periods of time. Now they're saying billions of years. For this, they willingly are ignorant of. The people who scoff at the Bible are willingly ignorant of 3 things. Number 1, that by the word of God, the heavens were of old. God spoke with his word and created the heavens, and heaven is plural. And the earth standing out of the water and in the water. How can the earth be out of the water and in the water? We'll cover that in a minute. Second thing they're ignorant of is how the world was overflowed with water and perished. That would be Noah's flood. So the scoffers are ignorant of how God made the heavens. They don't know what it was like originally, and how the earth was in the water and out of the water. We'll talk about that. And they're ignorant of the flood that overflowed and destroyed the world. And the third thing they're ignorant of is the coming judgment of God. They don't want to talk about that. They don't want to admit God even exists. Okay, so the scoffers are ignorant of the creation, the flood, and the coming judgment. I take the position that the Bible dates add up to about 6,000 years ago for the creation. If you add them up from Genesis, get over here, you can see it. Genesis chapter 5 gives the dates before the flood came, and Genesis 11 gives the dates after the flood came. We've got the names, and then we get down to Joseph. We got secular history from him, being one of the leaders in Egypt. So it comes to about 4000 BC for the creation. But what happened? A guy named James Hutton, back in the 1700s or early 1800s, estimated the earth was much older than a few thousand years. Up until this time, nearly everybody taught the earth is 6,000 years old. That's what the Bible said, and that's what all the evidence seemed to point to. Well, Hutton didn't like that. He was a Scottish scientist and said, oh no, the earth is much older than that. And he said the processes that happen today is the same process that's always been going on. Long, slow, gradual processes. Like he would look at the sediment building up in the river and say, well, if it's building up 6 inches a year and the sediment is 10,000 feet thick, then it must be X number of years old. So they tried to use that uniformitarianism doctrine to tell the age of the earth. Of course, that negates any catastrophe. We'll do a bunch of sedimentation in a hurry. But James Hutton's book had a very strong influence on a guy named Charles Lyell, an English geologist who hated the Bible, hated Christianity. Charles Lyell made up the idea of principles of geology, that the layers are forming slowly over millions of years. I'll ask Jackson tonight, I'll ask anybody listening, how can the layers be different ages at all? Where are the top, they say the top layer is younger. Okay, where's it coming from? Outer space? Every speck of dirt on the planet would be the same age, whether it's 6,000 or 6 trillion. So my contention is there is no such thing as a geologic column. It does not exist anywhere. All of the layers are probably from the flood of Noah, rapid deposition. But Lyell made up this idea. He was the lawyer, hated the Bible. He wrote a book about it, 1830, Principles of Geology. Well, 3 books, volume 1, 2, 3. He said, men of superior talent who thought for themselves and were not blinded by authority. He was mocking the Bible. He had to be kind of careful back in the 1830s to do that, but he did gently and carefully try to mock the Bible. He kept calling it ancient doctrines, and he said, oh, you rest on scriptural authority. He said, I would say, I rest on science. And they try to do that. They try to make a dichotomy, like you can't rest on the Bible and science. I will contend that the Bible is scientifically accurate. There is no scientific evidence against anything in the Bible. The Bible says they bring forth after their kind. That's all that's ever happened. Dogs produce dogs and cows produce cows. No exceptions. None. He said, religion as well as sound philosophy had suffered by mixing sacred writings with physical science. I taught physical science for 15 years. I love physical science, and I've got no problem. It blends perfectly with what the Bible says. So they talk about those, we talk about the disordered state of Earth's crust. The crust of the Earth, and I've been to all 50 states and 60, I forget how many countries, a bunch of countries, and there's no question there's many layers. Been to Grand Canyon, been to a lot of the major canyons in the world. There's no question the Earth has layers. And there's no question the Earth's crust is a disaster. It's all jumbled up. How did it happen? Well, I think it's the flood. Bible, let's see, get it to Lyell. Charles Lyell invented what we call today the Geologic Column, and it looks like Jackson wants to defend the position that that is true. I will say the Geologic Column does not exist any place in the world. No place. It's true the Earth has layers. They're all the same age, all of them. If you shuffle a deck of cards, is the top card younger? No, all the same. They made up the names. Charles Lyell did this. Charles Lyell, Cretaceous, Jurassic, and all that. They talk about during the Carboniferous period. There's no such thing as a Carboniferous period. All the layers are the same age. They made a movie, Jurassic Park. There's no such thing as a Jurassic period. During the Scopes monkey trial, 1925, they said the lowest layers are obviously the oldest. Stop right there. The lawyer should have said, objection. How can you possibly prove that? Is the bottom card on your deck of cards that you're shuffling the oldest? No. This geologic column does not exist anywhere. It's a fact the Earth has layers. That's not a question. Evolutionist says the layers form slowly over millions of years. The Bible-believing Christian says, no, the layers are all from the flood in the Noah's time. And those who believe in evolution, so they're always trying to erase that line and make the fact part of their theory, part of the fact, and it's not. Their interpretation is not true. It's not part of the fact for sure. Geologic column is the Bible for the evolutionists. The only place you'll ever find it is in the textbooks. It does not exist. This textbook admitted it. The author probably got fired. Is that if there were a column of sediments, unfortunately, no such column exists. What an admission. If they didn't fire him, I don't know. They talk about change through time in the geologic column. If it was in one place, like they teach about it, it would be 100 miles thick. There is no geologic column. There's a lot of layers to the Earth. Article about the young Earth creationists claim geologic column does not exist. It's shown the entire column exists in North Dakota. No, all the layers exist in that order in North Dakota. They predicted, they say in their geologic column, you have a layer of, Cenozoic, Mesozoic, Paleozoic, be limestone and sedimentary rock and stuff like that. You may find that if you shuffle a deck of cards, you might accidentally get 3 hearts in a row. Yeah? So, doesn't prove anything. This is the Minnesota limestone. Hypersaline waters. Wow. High salt waters. What do you think? Well, I think during the flood, there would be all kinds of catastrophes happening on the crust of the Earth. Let's see. Onshore to shelf of deep water. And the different things they find as they drill down through the crust. I lived in East Texas where they drill all the time. Used to talk to guys in the oil field about the holes that they drill. What do they come up with? There's no question the Earth has layers. No question. It is not true that they're different ages. Index fossils. What they did, they dated the layers by the types of fossils they contain. They tell the people the layers of the Grand Canyon, I've been there many times, those layers are different ages. Guys, if the layers are different ages, why are there no erosion marks between the layers? I mean, if that layer sat there for 5 million years waiting for the next one, isn't it going to rain once in a while in 5 million years? The erosion marks between the layers are nearly non-existent. If you shake up a jar of sand, gravel, clay, mud, water, it'll settle into layers for you every time. We do it here with a little sand thing. I thought I had one here on my desk, but I got a couple of them around here. You turn it over, and it automatically sorts into layers. Little sand art toy. And you can make all kinds of weird designs. The crust of the earth looks very similar, like it was shaken up by a flood. During the flood of Noah, the tide from the moon is going to continue pulling on, the moon's gravity is going to pull on our water and make a bump called the high tide. We're spinning around once a day in spite of what the flat earthers say. We are round and we are spinning. Okay, so the tide would change every 6 hours from high to low tide, except the moon is also moving. So it ends up 6 hours, 12 and a half minutes between high tide and low tide. So this tidal bulge, it comes up and down, an average of about 5 feet. Well, I'm in Lenox, Alabama, 31 degrees above the equator. And so at this latitude, the earth is spinning around once a day, like every latitude. So you can figure, do the trigonometry on it, sine, cosine, tangent. I taught that for a year. You'll find out that the earth is spinning around at this latitude at about, let me get it up here. Okay, right. 886 miles an hour. We're moving toward the east right here, right now. That means that tidal bump has to be kept under the moon by being dragged the same speed the earth is turning. Well, if we're turning 886 miles an hour and that tidal bump is being dragged to stay under the bump by moon's gravity, the water has to go 886 miles an hour to keep the bump full. That doesn't mean the whole ocean is, but the parts of it are keeping that bump full, raising it up and down. And so you're going to get what's called a turbidity current, going to cause all kinds of sedimentation, just like the little sand art toy does. Flume stratification experiments. You get all kinds of different layers forming very rapidly. That would roll the rocks back and forth like a rock tumbler and explain why gravel is rounded. I live in the middle of a gravel pit. Someone donated to us 140 acres of trillions of rounded rocks. They were tumbled back and forth in a rock tumbler called Noah's flood. So I think the layers of the earth would have been formed very rapidly during the rising and lowering of the tide. Noah was in the ark for 880 tidal changes. 880 times. The water came up, down, in, out. I think it'd make all these layers in minutes. So my contention is this geologic column does not exist. The Bible says they will delight in lies. And it's a lie. American Journal of Science years ago said, the intelligent layman has long suspected circular reasoning in the use of rocks to date fossils and fossils to date rocks. This was done in the 1830s. They said, how old is this layer? Well, what kind of fossils are in it? And they would date the rock layer by the fossils. Then you say, how old is this fossil? They say, well, where did you find it? I found it in this layer. So they date the fossils, they date the layers by the fossils and the fossils by the layers. Circular reasoning. The geologist has never bothered to think of a good reply, feeling the explanations are not worth the trouble, as long as the work brings results. Encyclopedia Britannica, many years ago, 70 years ago, it cannot be denied from a strictly philosophical standpoint. Geologists are arguing in a circle. Succession of organisms has been determined by a study of the remains, would be the fossils, and the age of the rocks, determined by the organisms they contain. They probably lost their job over that one too. But yes, the layers are dated by the fossils they contain, and the fossils are dated by the layers they are found in. Ever since William Smith, fossils have been and still are the best and most accurate method of dating and correlating the rocks in which they occur. Apart from very modern examples, I can think of no cases of radioactive decay being used to date fossils. They do not date the fossils with radioactive decay. They date them by geologic position, which is an obvious logical fallacy. Radiometric dating would not have been feasible if the geologic column had not been erected first. There's no way simply to look at a fossil and say how old it is unless you know the age of the rocks it comes from. Niles Eldridge, when I debated him, said that. If we date the rocks by the fossils, how can we then turn around and talk about patterns of evolutionary change? The rocks do date the fossils, but the fossils date the rocks more accurately. O'Rourke said, circularity isn't a circular reasoning. It's inherent. The charge of circular reasoning can be answered several ways. It can be ignored. You say, well, it's not your job. You're not a geologist, therefore we don't care what you say. If I say, look, guys, you're dating the rocks by the fossils and the fossils by the rocks, they'll say, where's your degree from? What difference does that make? What color shirt are you wearing? What difference does that make? Do they date the rocks by the fossils and the fossils by the rocks? Yes, they do. It cannot be denied by calling down the law of evolution. It's, oh, we know it happened. You don't know it happened. It can be admitted as a common practice or it can be avoided. So how do you handle the charge of circular reasoning? Ignore it, deny it, admit it, or avoid it. They know this is a problem. Jackson, if you keep studying this, you'll know too. There is no such thing as a geologic column. Let's see.
1 minute.
This guy said the lowest layers are obviously the oldest. This is from the Scopes monkey trial. Hold it. The lowest layers are obviously the oldest. No, they're not. Moving water deposits multiple layers simultaneously with the current. It'll put many layers down. There's a video you can watch online called Experiments in Stratification. Some French guy did this and showed it. While they poured sediments into moving water, it'd make 10 or 15 layers at the same time, sideways, not vertically. So a fossil up here could actually be older than a fossil found down here. This geologic column, all these layers, there's limestone, quite a few places in the geologic column. How do you know the difference between 100 million year old Jurassic limestone and 600 million year old Cambrian limestone? Only one way, by the index fossils. So I'll stand by my position. The Bible is true. The flood of Noah probably created nearly all the layers that we see and nearly all the fossils that we see. Fossils don't form today in any significant number. Animals die by the millions. They don't fossilize. I think the flood of Noah is the only logical explanation for why we have the layers to the earth, why we have the giant erosion canyons, why we have fossils at all. Thank you.
All right. I appreciate that opening statement, Dr. Hovind, clear, concise, and I appreciate the visuals. Also to the chat, I appreciate you tagging me with your questions. Also, thank you for the super chats and super stickers. We're going to have a solid audience Q&A. Jackson, we are now going to hand it over to you for your opening statement, and I'm glad to see that your computer is working. Everything is good because I see your screen is ready to share.
All right, let's hope it doesn't freeze up again.
You're good to go.
All right, you seeing it?
Good to go. Yes.
All right. This definitely exists. You can say it's 6,000 years old, but I think it's pretty objectively true that the geologic column exists. Now, he touched on the Williston Basin in North Dakota. That's obviously the one in North Dakota that you see there. But there are a lot more. And this map is from 1989. They still call Russia the USSR, as you can see. So there are a lot more known now. Here's the Williston Basin. It goes Pre-Cambrian, Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian, Permian, Carboniferous, or Carboniferous, Permian, Triassic, Jurassic, Cretaceous, Tertiary. The full column is here. It's also here in the Ganymede Basin of Libya. Donnie, can you still see me? Just making sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Everything's working good.
Okay. The only thing it's missing here is the Permian layer. So other than that, this is a complete geologic column in Libya. These are two sections of the Bonaparte Basin in Australia. It goes up from the Permian through the Tertiary. So almost a complete column there as well. This is the Tarim Basin from Pre-Cambrian up to Triassic, almost a complete column. It's pretty amazing coincidence that all these layers are in order by accident, as I think Kent was saying earlier. The Jiju Basin or G Basin, something. This is the Beaufort Sea Basin. Goes from Devonian up to Tertiary. Here's the Moesian Platform, two sections of it. This goes from the Pre-Cambrian to the Permian right here. In the upper section, you can see of the chart, it goes up to the Cretaceous. So the full column there as well. Here's a section. Kent Hovind, I was watching a video. He once said that no more than 3 layers can be found in sequential order. I don't know if he still holds that belief, but here's 4. Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian, all in the Yukon Basin. This is the Farah Basin in Afghanistan, the full geologic column from Pre-Cambrian to Tertiary. Everything's there. Now, let's see. No, I'm not done yet with this section. Here's some of the fauna of the Cambrian period in the Burgess Shale. You never find these animals out of place out of the Cambrian except for different species of trilobites up until the Permian. Everything else is endemic to the Cambrian. And why is that? Here's a list of species of fish found in Devonian formations. No modern fish, just placoderms, acanthodians, things like that. This is how the rock layers are actually dated. Sometimes index fossils are used, very often index fossils are used, but more often, to get absolute dates, you use these mass spectrometers to determine radiometric dates. It's not just somebody dyes a rock and if it turns blue, it's this old. It's a really complicated, precise process. You can tell from this equipment. They measure daughter element and parent element, and from that you can tell the age of the rock. You can even cross-reference it with other isotopes and other radioactive dating methods. Here it is correlated with carbon-14 and tree rings, and it matches perfectly. Let's see what else I got. This is the frogfish. You might be wondering why I'm talking about that in the geologic column. Well, if they were all formed at once, you would think that these frogfish, which live in the shallows like this one, and the abyss like this one, live in every habitat. You would think you'd find one in the Cambrian rock, one that gets swept up and buried during the flood, but you never do. These things are so slow. I actually used to have a pet one when I was a kid in a saltwater aquarium. They actually got eaten by a starfish. That's how slow they are. True story. So why aren't we finding these in Cambrian, Pre-Cambrian layers? And not all fossils form in water. This dinosaur formed in a volcanic ash flow, which can't be explained by Noah's flood. Now here are 3 fossil formations, early fossil formations. Can you still see me, Donnie? Just making sure again.
Yes, it's all coming in smoothly.
All right, good. These are the Ediacaran Hills in Australia, a Pre-Cambrian formation. The Maoshan Formation in China, Cambrian formation. And the Burgess Shale again, Cambrian formation in Canada, probably not too far from you, Donnie. Anyone can go and fossil hunt in these locations, except maybe the Chinese one, I don't know. But why don't you find shark teeth in these layers? They're marine layers. Their shark teeth are dense, they're hard, they fossilize easy, and they sink to the bottom. They would sink to the bottom in hydrologic sorting, or the 2,000 years before the flood, when the oceans existed in some form. So sharks shed tens of thousands in their lifetimes. There are a couple billion sharks in the world. Why don't we find one of these in the Cambrian, or the Silurian, Ordovician, any of those? Same goes for these skate eggs. I've actually found these in Gulf Shores, Alabama, probably not too far from where Ken is. In fact, I know not too far from where he is. Same thing for dead fish. Why didn't the fish die in the Cambrian layer and get buried during the flood? Why didn't one get swept in during the flood? There are no tuna fossils in the Cambrian or Ordovician or any of that. We'll get to some of this stuff later, I think. Here's more sections of geologic column that I found that are newer than that 1989 chart. This is the Untitled Basin or something. It goes from Pre-Cambrian up until the Triassic. So a good chunk of the column is here. West coast of India has 4 sections there. Germany has a complete column there. Denmark has an almost complete column there. And the Burgess Basin here is missing the Permian, but other than that, it's totally complete. I think it's a real coincidence that all of these exist like this. Another one in Pakistan. Now, I can't mention the Williston Basin. I'll go into that a little bit. Here are 3 sections of it. If it'll come up, hang on a second. All right, here it is. 3 sections of it in North Dakota, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan. Here's where oil can be found in it. That's why they know these layers. Another cross section. So it's 15 feet deep, 15,000 feet deep, rather. It'd be pretty shallow if it was 15 feet. Well design, 9,000 to 10,000 feet down. Here's the bore drilling tools, whatever they're called. Oil well. It says they drilled 10,500 feet down to the oil. or gas, whatever it is they're drilling out there. 205 gallons per minute. Here's the Gandamese Basin in Libya and the location of where the wells are, or at least it was as of 2009. I imagine they're not working right now after 2011. What happened there? And we can tell each layer is old by looking at stable isotopes of its atmospheric content. Here's, give it a second to come up. It says fluctuations in Pre-Cambrian oxygen. This is when oxygen was first starting to appear, so it was sporadic. It's determined by chromium isotopes. Then there was a pulse of oxygen in the late Cambrian associated with life. And then sulfur isotopes show the decrease in oxygen in the Ordovician period. And I'm skipping a couple up to Carboniferous, where the oxygen level was very high. That's why you find large arthropods on land, like the 8-foot millipede and a 3-foot wingspan dragonfly. Insects that large or arthropods on land can't survive that way because their breathing system is inefficient. That's also why you find a lot of coal in the Carboniferous strata. A lot of plant matter was alive at the time. A lot of it got fossilized or coalified. And that's why you find it mostly in the Carboniferous. A little bit into the Permian too. We'll get to some of this stuff later. Now here's a map of Alabama. I thought this would be interesting to look up. This is actually where Kent Hovind is sitting right now. This is the Paleozoic.
You got a couple minutes, Jackson.
All right. This is the Paleozoic, Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous. That's where Kent and his audience are sitting right now. You have a good section of the strata right below you. But here's a map of Alabama. You can see Cenozoic at the bottom, Mesozoic in the middle, and Paleozoic at the top. It's been shifted from plate tectonics. If you push Cenozoic up, Mesozoic up, and to cover the Paleozoic, you have the complete column there. So yeah, to reiterate, that is, yeah, the geologic column definitely exists, and you can prove that it's old. The bottom layers are older. So with that, I'll hand it back to Kent.
All right. I appreciate that opening statement, Jackson. I also appreciate the visuals. That was just on time, it looks like. So what we're going to do is hand it over to Dr. Hovind. Dr. Hovind, you have an 8-minute response, 8-minute rebuttal whenever you're ready.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. Well, I think he clearly demonstrated my point. These layers are dated by the fossils they contain, and the fossils are dated by the layers they're found in. This is from a geologic column picture from a typical textbook, and I taught earth science for 15 years. Notice it has limestone, shale, sandstone, shale, sandstone, limestone, conglomerate, a mixture. Sandstone, limestone, shale, limestone, sandstone. There's only 3 or 4 basic types of rock: sandstone, limestone, and shale. Now, there's limestone found quite a few places in here. How do you tell the difference between 100-million-year-old Jurassic limestone and 600-million-year-old Cambrian limestone? If I just took a piece of limestone to any university in the world and said, how old is it? Could they tell me? Well, they would right away ask the question, where did you find it? And so they want to date this limestone by the geologic column, which is already circular reasoning. And then they would look to see if there's any fossils in it. They look for index fossils. That's how the layers are actually dated. What you showed clearly, Jackson, was quite a few places in the world where they find the layers in the order that they put them in the textbook. I bet we could shuffle enough decks of cards, we could get them in, so we end up with, hearts, clubs, diamonds, spades in just a couple places. You might even get all 4 aces together in a certain order. If you keep shuffling the cards, it's just random shuffling. This geologic column that you talk about and that you seem to believe in very strongly does not exist. Here we have limestone, limestone, limestone. Look at any textbook. Quite a few of the layers are limestone. Red wall limestone, mauve limestone. How do you tell the difference? It's limestone. So this is simply not true. The index fossils, well, it's true. Clams, petrified clams like this one here, and sea-dwelling creatures. Quite a few different sea-dwelling creatures are found in the bottom layers when you drill holes or when you dig down, like our gravel pits here. They say clams are found at the bottom, Therefore, clams evolved first. I say, guys, no. Clams are found at the bottom because they're already at the bottom when the flood starts. They're the first ones to drown, to be buried. If there was turbulent, water moving back and forth, up and down like Noah's flood would do, you would get layers of mud deposited and sloshing back and forth rapidly. If the water came up 200 feet with a tide here during the flood when the earth is covered in water, you would get special tides that instead of going up and down 5 feet like they do now, they'd go up and down 200 feet because they're not interrupted. You get a harmonic tide. Now the water's rushing in and out, and it's going to make a layer of mud 50 feet thick in 10 seconds. This guy said trilobite fossils make good index fossils. If a trilobite's found in a rock layer, it probably formed 500 to 600 million years ago. Well, that's dating the fossils by the rocks and the rocks by the fossils, circular reasoning. Somebody found a human shoe print where the guy had stepped on and smashed a trilobite. How can that be? Trilobite found in Cambrian rock with a human footprint on it. They'll say, one guy said maybe aliens visited the planet and stepped on a trilobite. Some of the trilobites are found that are huge. I think it's very simple. Before the flood came, God made a perfect world. Trilobite eyes are the most complicated eye in the world ever. The eye of a trilobite, there's nothing more complex in all the different types of eyes in the world. That's one of the first creatures to evolve. And birds are found on top of the geologic column, mainly on top, because birds are the last ones to drown in a flood. Of course, they're found on top. They can fly around until they run out of gas. And when they do die, they float. They have hollow bones, hollow feathers. So the trilobite, quite a few trilobite types have been found, various layers. My contention is they all came from Noah's flood. There might be some trilobites still alive. There certainly are isopods that are similar to that. Up in Alaska, a friend of mine sent me, he said, Hovind, we got them up here all the time. We get them in our drilling equipment for the oil well. He sent me a jar of them. Graptolites, index fossils for 410 million year old rock. Really? New York State rock. Earth magazine. Well, they found graptolites still alive in the South Pacific. Therefore, they could be found in any rock layer, couldn't they? There's no such thing as a geologic column. There's no such thing as a Devonian period. It's a lie. There are no different ages to these layers. If the top layer is younger, I asked the question, I've never had an evolutionist answer it. Jackson, you can be the first. If the top layer is younger, like you say, where is it coming from? Outer space? If you simply are shuffling existing material and moving it from here to here and calling it younger now, it's still the same age. It was over here before. If I shuffle a deck of cards, it does not change the age of each card. So my contention is the geologic column does not exist. The layers all formed rapidly, which is why there are so many trees petrified standing up, running through all these layers. Right here, slide number 248. Alt-DV 248. They say these layers are different ages. I'm sorry, I just don't believe that. Petrified trees that are standing up, connecting all the layers, are a very common fossil. How do you get petrified trees standing, running through these layers? There's me at the one in Yellowstone, petrified forest, standing up. It doesn't take long for wood to petrify. You can do it in the laboratory probably in 30 minutes. But petrified trees are called polystrata fossils running through many strata. And yet you guys continue to teach the lie that the layers are different ages. Up in North Alabama, I'm in South Alabama, they find petrified trees running through several different seams of coal. Well, during the flood, the water coming up from the harmonic tide would knock all the trees down as it came rushing in to fill that bump and bury them in layers that would turn to coal. There's 11 consecutive layers of coal in several places in the world. How do you get a petrified tree standing up, coming right out of one seam of coal, going into the next seam of coal? You can do the math and look at it and say, well, we got all kinds of trees going through these layers. Let's look at all the samples, petrified standing trees. I've got sample H goes through the Mary Lee Formation of coal. Sample A goes down through the Blue Creek Formation, which you say are millions of years different in age. But A and H also are in the center layer. I mean, a kindergarten law student could say, Your Honor, I think the Mary Lee and the Blue Creek formed within a few weeks or months of each other, just like Noah's flood would do. There are 27 consecutive layers of trees petrified at the in Yellowstone called Specimen Ridge.
1 minute.
Many of them extend through many layers. They didn't grow there. The root system is gone. Here's the 30-foot petrified tree in Tennessee. The bottom's in a layer of coal. The top is in a totally separate layer of coal. One tree. And you want me to believe these layers are different ages? I am sorry, Jackson. You have been lied to. You've been brainwashed, and you swallowed it. I'm here to help. We'll get you converted. The layers are all the same age. All one big flood. Quit believing that stupid evolution religion. Canada. I said I got a minute left. Up in Canada, there's all kinds of petrified trees running through all these layers. They're common fossils. I'm sorry, it's just simply not true. I apologize for my throat here and the coughing. Go ahead, Jackson, take it away.
All right, I appreciate that, Dr. Hovind. That was your 8-minute rebuttal. Jackson, we will hand it over to you now. And you have up to 8 minutes as well. Whatever you don't use, as always, we can just throw into the audience Q&A. So go ahead. You are on mute, Jackson. Make sure you unmute yourself. And I can share your screen as well if you want.
Is it all right if I share my screen again?
Yeah, you're shared. You're shared.
Yeah. All right. Polystrate trees. Let's see. Most of the time, these trees are found in the Carboniferous period. They're not really going through multiple layers, as you contend. This is firmly in the Carboniferous. They're often associated with ancient peat bogs. That's how they often form. They're also associated with volcanic ash flows and local floods sometimes, yes. If you ever find one going through this layer, the Permian-Triassic boundary, then that would be a major find. Or this, the KT boundary, the Cretaceous-Tertiary boundary, that would be a major find also. Now, you say, how do you know how old the limestone is? Well, you can't radiometrically date limestone. You have to date the igneous rock between it. Let's see. Now, where do the rock layers come from? There's a thing called the rock cycle, and seafloor spreading, volcanism. So that would be my answer as to where the new rock material comes from. Some of it is shifted around, but oftentimes the igneous rock is coming up from the mantle, and seafloor spreading is doing more of that also. Let's see. The Trilobite Eye, you mentioned Trilobite Eyes. I'll get to that in a second. First, let me explain radiometric dating. You often use that candle analogy. You didn't this time, but they use this equation, the algebra equation. This is the number of uranium atoms now, top one. Second line, this is the number of uranium atoms originally. They know that because it's equal to the sum of the uranium and lead atoms measured now. So they're working backwards. If you have two parts of an algebra equation, you can determine the third part. They're also measuring two isotopes of uranium here. Uranium-235 to lead-207 and uranium-238 to lead-206. So if those two ages cross-reference each other, that's a pretty good indication that the age is correct. And plus, you can use other radiometric dating methods on top of that. Now, the Trilobite Eye, I guess I can stop sharing the screen now for a second. Let's see. The Trilobite Eye is not the most complex eye ever devised. That would be probably the octopus eye. The first trilobite eyes, the red leachid trilobites, they had fairly simple eyes compared to later trilobites, which like during the Permian, their eyes were on stalks. They had many more lenses for their eyes. And why are birds found on top? You mentioned that because they outflew the flood. Well, why aren't pterosaurs found on top? They have light bones. They could fly. I mean, there were feathered dinosaurs that could fly. That were like Archaeopteryx. Why is Archaeopteryx not found at the top? Let's see. Fossil formation today, we've argued about that before, and I still say yes, fossils do form today. There are still volcanoes erupting. There are still local floods happening. That's how fossils form. And dogs produce dogs. That's another common line you use. What would you say Hesperocyon is? It's an early canine, technically, but it's very cat-like. It was near the canine feliform division. a couple tens of millions of years ago. I forget when, but it looks nothing like a dog. It looks almost like a cat. So you say these kinds are well defined, and they're not all the time. Same for like vegetables today. Like corn today looks nothing like what it originally came from. So is that still the same kind, or has it changed kinds? I guess your answer would be it hasn't, but it certainly looks like it has. Now, the trilobite and the shoe, I've never seen that, but I saw one of your videos posted the other day of Pre-Cambrian bird tracks, and I looked into it, and those prints are actually from the late Triassic. The Nature article clearly says late Triassic in the upper part, right in the smack dab in the middle, and they attribute it to Pterosaurian theropods, which did exist at that time. If it was really Pre-Cambrian, that would be a problem, but late Triassic, not so much. So with that, I think that's probably good for now. Donnie, you can take it back.
All right, I appreciate that rebuttal, Jackson. That gives us a few minutes that we can throw into the audience Q&A as well, since we have a ton of questions. So what we are doing now is moving into the open discussion, because that concludes the opening statements and the rebuttals. Gentlemen, we are going to hand it over to you. And since Jackson actually just finished with his rebuttal, why don't we hand it over to Dr. Hovind to kind of kick us off here in this discussion?
Well, sure. Jackson, you mentioned a rock cycle, where rocks are weathered down and, and volcanic activity, melts them and come up as igneous rock, etc. Aren't all the particles still the same age? Shuffling a deck of cards does not change the age of the card. How can any speck of dirt on this planet be a different age than any other speck of dirt on this planet, other than coming from outer space? You want to make a whole layer like Grand Canyon from outer space? Well, anyway, simple question. How do you claim the layers can be different ages? They all have to be the same age. Tell me why.
Well, the igneous layers come up through the mantle, so that's new rock. When it solidifies and crystallizes, mineralizes, whatever, it's new rock. That's why one of the reasons they don't date sedimentary rock, because oftentimes it's just weathered down and moved around, but not always. But that's not the main reason they don't date sedimentary rock. So that's pretty much what I have to say about that.
I would agree. I've toured and climbed on many volcanoes and studied them actively. Volcanoes shoot out lava, which hardens into a different type of igneous rock. I understand. But the stuff that it melted down in the ground was already there. If the Big Bang theory is true, which I'm sure you believe, the explosion created all the matter in the universe at the same time. Every speck of dirt in the universe is the same age. You cannot have different age for these layers. Or if I said this, it was changed from over here to over here, moved to a new position, like shuffling the cards, it doesn't change the age of the card. I don't know how you can't see it. The geologic column that you believe in and what the debate is about tonight does not exist. They may find them in the order that Charles Lyell said they came in. You may find that randomly a few places around the world. Well, first, why isn't it that way every place around the world? And it's not in that order every place. And it's just a random shuffling of already existing material. I think Peter in the Bible was right. The scoffers are willingly ignorant of the creation and the flood. The flood formed all those layers, Jackson. Nearly all of them. May get local floods now, form a few, but generally 99.9% of all the layers in the earth were formed at one time in Noah's flood. And that's why the petrified tree standing up is not a problem at all for a creationist. He's not bound to bow down to a dumb theory like evolution.
All right. Well, all the matter in the universe did come out in the same point, technically, but not in its present form. It started out as energy that turned to hydrogen, and then stars fused higher elements up to iron. And from there, supernova created the heavier elements. I mean, some elements are so heavy that they only last for a half-life of a fraction of a second from supernovas, and they just decay out of existence. But there is a geologic column. I've shown you that. It does definitely exist. And why isn't it found in that order everywhere? It's because of plate tectonics being shifting things around over time and erosion. So you do have a lot of areas where this column is nearly complete or totally complete. And the odds of all of these being coincidental I think, are astronomical. So I'll hand it back to you.
Well, I agree. The odds of it happening at all is astronomical. But again, sedimentary rock, being melted down in a volcano and coming out again as igneous rock is still the same age. Shuffling it around didn't change the age of it. You're claiming that the top layer is younger than the bottom layer. Where's it coming from? Are you saying it's being changed? It's being changed around? Well, then it's still the same age.
Well, you got to remember the crust of the Earth is just this tiny little layer. When it goes back into the ground through subduction or whatever, it's the stuff that's coming up is most likely not what's going down. It's new material altogether. So it's
the crust of the Earth compared to the size of the Earth is about like a piece of paper compared to this globe.
right.
The crust of the Earth is, say, 40, 50, 60 miles thick. Well, you do the scale math on that, it's about like a piece of paper laying on this globe. I understand. So most of the Earth inside is still a hot molten rock in there. And I think the layers on top, during the flood of Noah, it would be broken up, shuffled around, moved around. They're all the same age, and it's demonstrated by the trees that are standing up, connecting them all. It can't be more clear. These layers did not form millions of years apart. They were all deposited quickly. We go to experiments in stratification in Colorado Springs. They've got a big tank where they do research on this. The Navy has a tank to do studies on if they're going to park their submarine in a canyon. Is the canyon going to be there next year? They have to know the contour of the bottom of the ocean. So they study stratification. In that video that he made years ago, back in the 80s, I think, the French guy on there said he shows clearly multiple layers forming rapidly, and they form sideways, not vertically, horizontally. Just watch the video. I'm sorry for my throat. Go ahead.
That way. Oftentimes they do form sideways, yeah.
Okay.
But at different times. It doesn't mean they all formed at once. And what was the other thing he said? I'm drawing a blank. Reiterate that for me.
I've forgotten. I slept since then. Every speck of dirt in the universe, the moon, Saturn, Jupiter, all of them would be the same age if it all came from a big bang.
Well, no,
everything.
It wouldn't.
Is it being created? Well, is it being created out of nothing from someplace?
All the matter was there, but it wasn't in its present form. There's a fusion. New elements can be produced from existing elements.
Are you telling me when they date a rock, they're only dating when it was formed into that current configuration? Be careful.
They're dating when it was, yes.
Okay.
When it was formed. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I cannot. My throat is hurting too bad. Okay, now, you mentioned constantly radioactive dating. None of the radiometric dating techniques, uranium-208, lead-208, uranium dating, potassium, argon, rubidium, strontium, none of those were invented until about the 1950s. Way before that,
they weren't effective until the 1950s.
Okay, 1830, they started teaching the layers are different ages. How did they date the layers in 1830 before there ever was a carbon dating or potassium, argon, or rubidium, strontium dating? How did they date the layers before the radiometric dating?
They used relative dating methods. Like
top layers,
VARVs, etc.
Right. People listen carefully to what he's saying. Relative dating. Top layer must be younger than the layer under it. Back to my point. A flood of Noah shaking up all those layers. You shake up the layers, and they're going to shake up the sediment with water, and it's going to automatically sort into layers. You can do it with a jar of dirt from your backyard, Jackson. get some water, and put some dirt and sand, gravel, clay in there. We do it here every day when we take tours. Shake it up and set it down. It settles into layers in less than 1 minute.
Sure, that'll work, but that's not necessarily how the layers of the Earth formed.
That's my contention, that it's more logical to say that's how they form. There are several different theories. You have a theory of how they form, so do I. Why do I have to pay for your theory to be taught in the schools? Yours is that's not science. You couldn't prove it happened.
Well, it's not up to me, but there are denser layers above lighter layers in the geologic column. There are igneous layers all in between. There are aeolian deposits all in between, forming air. So it doesn't make any sense that the whole column could have been formed in one event.
Well, I think the flood lasted for a year. And just like I mentioned, the tide going up and down 880 times during that flood. Noah was in the ark for a year. The tide was probably actually going up and down for about 9 months. You take 9 months times 12 hours in a day, or 16 hours in a day, 24 hours in a day, and then divide it by 6 hours in the tidal change, how much it would be. There's 880 to 1,000 tidal changes. The water's going up, down, in, out. That's where the layers came from. 1 year flood of Noah. I'd say nearly all of them. Now we get layers deposited around here once in a while in a rainstorm. It takes the gravel from here and moves it over to here. But that's minuscule compared to what we see on the big scale of the Earth. 1,000-foot thick layer. Grand Canyon, 6,000 feet deep. All stratified. Yeah.
Well, again, that can't explain a lot of the layers and laid down by water. So igneous layers are one of them. Aeolian deposits. A lot of the evaporite deposits can't form rapidly like that. Shale even takes calm, shallow seas to form most of the time. So, I mean, it's just going against all the geology to say this all formed at once.
I think you find a lot of geologists who believe the flood formed all the layers. There's many groups of scientists, highly trained scientists, who will say, look, the geologic column does not exist. The layers exist. That's not the question. But are they different ages? And the answer is no. They're all the same age. You can call the folks at ICR, Institute for Creation Research, who have PhDs in their field of geology from accredited universities, who say the layers had to all form at the same time. But anyway, the title of the debate tonight is, does the geologic column support creation or evolution? I would say there is no geologic column, but the stratas, the layers that we see in the earth, support the idea of a worldwide flood. And the Bible says the scoffers at the end of time would be willingly ignorant of the creation and the flood. That's you, Jackson.
All right. Well, I just showed you 20 locations where the geologic column is. I mean, you can say it's all the same age.
Okay,
say they're all the same age.
Okay, Jackson, let's take 10,000 decks of cards and get 10,000 people to all shuffle them. Would I be able to go through those and find where it's spades, clubs, diamonds, hearts in that order? Well, sure, probably happened a bunch of times in different people shuffling the cards. Can I find the sandstone, limestone, shale in that order? Yeah. Maybe next door it's a different order. Well, during flood, turbulence, all kinds of strange things happen with water flow. And just the moon pulling the water up and down, keeping it full at the same speed the Earth is turning, at this latitude, 886 miles an hour, up in Canada slower, but that would form layers sideways. They don't form this way. They form sideways when the water's moving. I'll fix my voice and do a whole video on that just for you sometime. Are we okay? Yeah. Okay.
Well, again,
anyway, Donnie, I thought Donnie had Q&A time, but unless you got more to stay on that.
I was gonna jump in there. Why don't we hand it there, Jackson, if you wanted to respond to that real quick, maybe a couple more minutes of this, and then we're gonna do some quick closings and then get through as many of these questions as we can. So, Jackson, go ahead. However you wanted to respond.
All right. Well, the column does objectively exist in this order in many places around the globe. So, I mean, I'm not sure how you can argue against this. You can say they're all the same age all you want. I don't care. But how you can just deny that they're even in that order, I don't understand. So that's all I have to say.
Yeah, if you want to do a quick response there, Dr. Hovind, then we'll go into some closing statements.
Well, like I mentioned, if you shake up a jar that has mud and water in it, it'll automatically separate the particles based upon their size, based upon hydrologic sorting. So if we shake up a jar of mud with water, it'll sort into this. There'll be layers of sand, silt, and then clay always at the top. We do it every day when people come tour Dinosaur Adventureland. Are the layers the same age? Yeah. They were all in the jar at the same time. How can the top layer be younger? Is it coming from outer space? If it's just shuffled from here to here, it's still the same age. You're just not getting it. But okay, that's all I can say on the topic.
All right. So what we're going to do here then, gentlemen, is go into just some short, let's say up to 5-minute closing statements. And then we are going to get through a few audience questions, and we will wrap this up at the 1.5 hour mark. So, Dr. Hovind, you did start with your opening statement, so we can hand it over to you. If you'd like your 5-minute closing statement, we'll give Jackson his 5 minutes, then we'll do some audience questions.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. In the book of Matthew in the Bible, chapter 19, Jesus said, "Have you not read? He which made them at the beginning made them male and female," talking about Adam and Eve. Similar story in Mark chapter 10. The Bible clearly teaches the creation of Adam was the beginning. Jesus said the creation of Adam was the beginning. What Jackson is teaching and what the atheists and evolutionists are teaching is this is not true. Jesus was lying. And you're welcome to believe that. But I just want to point out for the record, Your Honor, they're calling Jesus a liar, and they're calling the Bible a lie. Bible says by one man sin entered into the world. We have sin on this planet, people doing wicked things because of Adam. The evolution theory says, oh, it's man, death brought man into the world. Lots of death, billions of things had to die so the improved species can survive and take over. And so gradually this amoeba slowly turned into something 2-celled, 3-celled, 4-celled, and finally became a human. And death of the inferiors and unfit drives the entire process. Where the Bible says God made a perfect world and man wrecked it. You guys think death brings man into the world. I think man brought death into the world. And Adam was the first man, and Eve's the mother of all living. So the Bible clearly says nothing died until Adam sinned. And the Bible says we all came from Adam and Eve. And all humans would be interfertile. Adam was 130 when his son was born, according to Genesis 5. That boy was 105, and his son was 90. You can add up the dates, as I've done many times in my chart, and talk about the Bible dates clearly add up to about 4,000 years before Christ, or 6,000 years ago. I'm not one of those guys that tries to put an exact date on it. I'd give it plus or minus a small amount of time, but not millions of years. So the Bible dates add up to 6,000. Your position is clearly calling Jesus a liar and saying there was death before sin. The Geologic Column, I will stand by my position, does not exist any place in the world. It's a matter of shaking up existing material, redepositing it based on the density of the material, or based upon the particle size that determines how fast it can sink. With animals, they're sorted based upon their intelligence. Clams are at the bottom because clams aren't too smart, compared to birds that are at the top because birds are a little smarter. They avoid a flood. So I think any sorting of the fossils would be determined by Noah's flood, not by evolution of them one evolving into another. We've never seen any animal or plant produce a baby other than its same kind. And then they're going to argue, what is a kind? Well, a 4-year-old can tell you a dog and a wolf are the same kind of animal, and a 4-year-old can tell you a dog and a banana are not the same. So I think in 99.99% of the cases, a 4-year-old could answer the question, is this the same kind or not? But the atheists and evolutionists love to get off on that rabbit trail because they know they're trapped. Do you believe, I would ask the simple question, do you believe a banana and a whale are related and have a common ancestor? Yes or no? Answer that later on. Okay, go ahead.
All right, perfect. I appreciate that, Dr. Hovind. And now we're going to hand it over to Jackson. Jackson Rowe, you have up to 5 minutes for your concluding statement as well. And on your first word, I'll start the timer. Go ahead.
All right. Well, I'm not here to call Jesus a liar. He may have existed. In my opinion, I don't know. If he was the Son of God, then I guess I'll find out someday. But Christians can believe in evolution, accept evolution, and accept the Earth is not 6,000 years old. Plenty of them do. Now, as for clams being stupid, that's why they're on the bottom of the geologic column. I think that's a simplistic answer, because my pet frogfish was pretty stupid, and why is it not on the bottom of the ocean? So, like I said in the beginning of my opening statement, and kinds being well defined, they're not. I was watching a video you made a day ago where you called all lizards one kind. So what is that, class or order now? It's all a single kind instead of genus or family. So I think we're very confused about what kinds are. I think baraminology is very jumbled, to say the least. But I had fun debating Kent. I always do. I have fun with every debate, win or lose, tie. Doesn't matter to me. I'll do it again, and I enjoy it. So that's all I have to say. So thanks for tuning in.
All right, I appreciate that concluding statement there, Jackson. Gentlemen, thank you for a cordial, respectful debate. I appreciate it. Very easygoing. Looks like Dr. Hovind just dropped out. Could be an accident there, so that's fine.
Yeah.
We'll wait for him to rejoin for some audience questions. And here we go. Glad to have you back, Dr. Hovind.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. Well, again, thank you so much for a cordial debate, easygoing debate. And Dr. Hovind, I appreciate you sticking with us. I understand, your throat's a little sore tonight, so I appreciate that. God bless you. And why don't we just get into some of these questions? As we always do here on Standing for Truth, whoever the question is for, in order that we can move along smoothly, we'll make sure that person gets the last word. Okay, so I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning. And I appreciate you guys tagging me in the chat. We do have 250 people live watching, so that's very helpful that I don't miss your question. So first one comes in from Surf Panther. He says, question for Jackson Rowan. I've got it up on screen for you, Jackson. He says, how do evolutionists think T-Rex soft tissue survived 65 million years ago?
Kind of formed it. Am I unmuted now?
Yeah, I just unmuted you, though, if you wanted to maybe restart your answer. No
the
problem.
Explanation in the paper is iron formed chains of kind of preserving the some microscopic soft tissue, kind of like formaldehyde works. So we're not finding like whole bones. We're finding like microscopic amounts. If this happened 4,000 years ago, we should be finding total unfossilized dinosaur bones. And if you can find that, a totally unfossilized dinosaur skeleton, then I'll say, yeah, there's something wrong here. But if there's a good explanation for a tiny amount of soft tissue, then I'll say, I don't think we need to rewrite the whole age of the Earth. So that's my answer for that.
Okay, well, I appreciate that answer, Jackson. Dr. Hovind, anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, yeah, they did rewrite the age of the Earth back in the 1830s, unnecessarily. Before that time, most people thought the Earth was a few thousand years old. Now, to find T-Rex material that is unfossilized and say it was encapsulated by iron, tell you what, get some hamburger, put it in an iron container, and leave it out on your sidewalk for 1,000 years, 10,000, 20, 2 million. It'll rot. I'm sorry. The answers they've given for the unfossilized dinosaur bone are ludicrous on their face. If they wish to believe that, that's fine, but that's not scientifically provable. How could you prove such a thing? I think the fact that we find so many animals fully articulate, all the bones are still together, still connected, like they died drowning like Noah's flood. I showed a bunch of those the other night on my YouTube channel, Kent Hovind Official. So I think the answers that they've tried to give to the unfossilized soft tissue issue is ludicrous. I think in a court of law, they'd be laughed out of a court of law. You mean iron encapsulated that and kept that soft tissue? And it wasn't just microscopic particles. There was a lot of soft tissue found. But I'll leave that to the folks at ICR to handle that, or Answers in Genesis. They've got people who have written long papers on that topic.
I appreciate that response there, Kent. And Jackson, question was for you originally, so go ahead. You get the last word.
Well, they actually did that experiment with iron particles in a container, and they left it for a year, and they left the control a year without any iron in it. The control rotted, and the experimental with the iron in it didn't rot. So it works like formaldehyde. So the concept was proven by that. So that's all I really have to say about that.
All right. Well, I appreciate that response. Next question comes in from Cool Jesus. This one is for Kent. Question is, and I've got it up on screen. He says, can you ask Kent why there are no pterosaurs in the upper layers? He said that birds could fly above the floodwaters. What about the pterosaurs?
If you'll watch my creation seminar part 3, where I talk about dinosaurs in general, how they've always lived with man, and some may still be alive. There have been many reported sightings of smaller pterosaurs in the last 100 years, still alive. So if we find one still alive, nothing matters in the fossil record. Nobody's ever found human and chicken footprints in the same rock strata. Would that prove humans and chickens did not live together? No, we got chickens right here in our dinosaur adventureland, 35 different varieties of them. So I lost his question there. So can you put that back up, Donnie? I got off track.
Yeah, no problem. So the question was, Cool Jesus, can you ask Kent why there are no pterosaurs in the upper layers?
Well, first, I'm not sure that there aren't. Okay, how would you know that there aren't? If a person found one and tried to publish a paper on it in an atheistic journal or a journal that supports the evolution theory, it wouldn't get published. How many articles are there against communism in North Korea being published in the local paper? None. So I think evolution is a carefully protected religion, and any articles that would go against it simply won't get published in major science journals. And then they say, see, they don't publish. Well, because it's like North Korea is probably the best example. We have a similar thing here when it comes to protecting evolution and who gets to write published articles in peer-reviewed journals. So I don't think we could prove that they haven't been found. If they haven't been published on in a accredited journal or peer-reviewed journal, that still wouldn't mean anything because of the great protection of the evolution religion, where they cover each other's backside.
All right, I appreciate that response, Kent, and I appreciate the question from Cool Jesus. Jackson, anything you wanted to add to that question?
Yeah, there's a legend called the Ropin of a living pterosaur, but it seems to have magical powers and can glow in the dark. So I'm not sure how credible that one is. And there's some fake photos allegedly from the Civil War of pterosaurs, but again, they turned out to be fake. So I don't think pterosaurs are alive today. But if they were, they wouldn't be covered up, I don't think. I mean, they didn't cover up the coelacanth when it was discovered. And, that was thought to be extinct for 100, 200 some odd million years. So I think that's it's a conspiracy is a bit much, but that's all I really have to say.
All right. Thank you, Jackson. And Kent, you get the last word on that one.
I know. It's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so here's a question that comes in for the both of you, Jackson and Kent. So this question is from Bob Hope. I appreciate the question there, Bob. So I've got it up on screen. He says, standing for truth, can you please ask both of your guests if they believe there is a difference between evolution and Darwin's theory of evolution, so universal common ancestry, and which one is the least credible? I guess since Kent started last time, Jackson, did you want to start this time?
Sure. Well, there are different forms like Lamarckism, which has been totally disproven, Lamarckism. There's original Darwinism, which Darwin got a lot wrong. He got a bunch right, but he got a lot wrong. So neo-Darwinism is the more modern form that we know today, pretty much. There's a little bit of variation with that, but yeah, that's hand it over to Kent.
All right. Thank you, Jackson. Dr. Dino, over to you.
Well, yeah, that's why in my seminar, I start off by pointing out this word evolution is a slippery word. It has 6 different meanings. Cosmic evolution is the origin of time, space, matter. That's purely imagination. Then you'd have to have chemical evolution. If the Big Bang happened and produced hydrogen, how do you get uranium and platinum and lead and all these other elements? You can't fuse past iron. It doesn't happen. It's imagination. You'd have to have organic evolution somewhere along the line. This non-living material's got to come alive. Organic evolution has never been met. And if they did in the laboratory, take a bunch of chemicals and produce life in the lab, that would prove it takes intelligent life to create intelligence to create life. That's all it would prove. Then you have what's called macroevolution, where an animal changes to a different kind of animal. That's never been seen. You can't even imagine it. Then you have microevolution, variations within the kind. That happens. So you have to define the word evolution. Somebody says, do you believe in evolution? I say, well, I think dogs and wolves have a common ancestor. I don't think dogs and pine trees do. The scientific, and science is what we can observe, study, test, and demonstrate. That's what the word means, seer, to know. What do we know? We know cows make cows and dogs make dogs. We know that. We do not know that cows and bananas have a common ancestor. You can believe that. That's a religion. Can't get them to admit it. I found my section on part 3 about dinosaurs still living, and pterosaurs in particular, about the giant bat. When they show natives in different parts of the world, they say, oh yeah, that's the different name for it, where they live. But I don't think there's many dinosaurs left. I think people have killed most of them. But I think there could be a few still around. From the creation viewpoint, they always lived with man. Man killed off most of them, calling them dragons or some other name. And there could be a couple stragglers still around. To me, not a big deal.
All right, I appreciate that response from the both of you, Kent and Jackson. So this one came in the form of a super chat, SNYWE. I appreciate the question in super chat. I put it up on screen. We can read it together here. It looks like kind of a technical question. So what do you make, this one's for you, Dr. Hovind. What do you make of the fact that the Archaean Era is with dead ancient Archaean organisms entrapped in chert, which is a chemical precipitate with tiny interlocking grains?
Well, I think the question is invalid. There's no such thing as an Archaean Era. All of the layers of the rock are the same age. That's been my contention all evening. So the premise is like asking me, why are elephants orange? They're not orange, okay? There is no Archaean Era. And as far as the particulars about being entrapped in chert or something, I don't know. I'd have to see the details on that, but it wouldn't matter. The flood would cause all kinds of things to be entrapped in all kinds of different sediments and even in volcanic eruptions. They can entrap things in the lava flow if it's not hot enough to vaporize it or totally annihilate it. You can get specimens trapped in ash flows. That's quite common when ash flows for fossils to be formed, if they're not too hot and not enough chemical in there to dissolve it completely. So I think there is no Archaean Era. I'll stand by that.
All right, I appreciate the super chat, and I appreciate the answer there, Kent. Anything you wanted to add to that, Jackson?
Yeah. I'm not sure exactly what they're talking about here. I've never heard of this, but I have heard of ancient colonies of bacteria living on the seafloor that are essentially a couple million years old. So also what Kent said last about nothing fuses above iron, that's true, but supernova create things much higher than iron. Heavy elements, like I was saying, that don't even exist for more than a millisecond before decaying because there's so many neutrons. But anyway, that's all.
All right, thank you, Jackson. Dr. Hovind, did you want a quick final word on that one?
Well, yeah, his answer that supernovas did it. You got a chicken and an egg problem here. You have to have the material to make the star, and you got to have the star to make the material. It's a chicken and an egg problem. I think they avoid it. They don't even see it. Go ahead.
All right, I appreciate it, Kent. So this one comes in from Mike Corleone. I appreciate the question. Mike, this one is for you, Jackson. He says, for Jackson Rowe, if you find a fish in a layer that is suspected to be Cambrian, wouldn't you just change the name of the layer? And make sure you unmute yourself, Jackson.
Well, no. You can go to the Burgess Shale in Canada, the Cambrian Formation. Everyone knows about it. You can go to the Mao Shinshan Shales in China. If you find a fish there, it's going to be public. You can prove that it came from there. And they found primitive chordates like Picaya and Hycuictis, but nothing higher than like a jawed fish, not a bony fish. But if they did find that would be pretty incredible, and it would stir some things up. So that's my answer.
All right, thank you, Jackson. Anything you wanted to add to that, Kent?
Well, this brings up my point at the beginning. There's no such thing as a Cambrian layer. If you find a fossil you're going to name the layer by the fossil found in it. This is a classic example of what I said earlier. This is circular reasoning. The layers are dated by the fossils are dated by the layers. It is insanity to believe such a thing.
All right, I appreciate it. Kent, Jackson, quick final word. Question was for you.
I don't really have much to add except for something Kent said earlier about you have a chicken and egg problem with the stars. Stars are made of hydrogen and helium, so you don't really have a chicken and an egg problem here. You don't need heavy elements to make stars. That's all I have to say.
All right. We're going to have to wind it down with these last one or two questions. We are coming at the 1.5 hour mark, and I want to respect the time of the debater. So this one is from Sean Mock. This one comes in for you now, Dr. Hovind. We've had a great mix of questions, actually, for the both of you, Jackson and Kent. So this one, I got it up on screen. He says, question for Dr. Hovind. Were all the layers created from the global flood?
I would say nearly all of them. I mean, we get small flooding around here, and I live in a gravel pit where when they mine the stuff out, dump it through the sorters and pour it down the hillside, you can get layers again. Certainly, some layers in local areas are being deposited. I could make one right now. But the vast majority of the layers of the earth were created during Noah's flood, when the water's going up and down, just the tide going up and down, in and out, undisturbed, a harmonic tide, you can Google that, would make layers thousands of feet of stratification, which is what we see in the world. And Noah was in the ark, 880 tidal changes. So I would stand by it that nearly all of the layers of the earth today formed during that flood, containing trillions of dead things. They drowned in the flood. I challenge you to show me a place where fossils are forming today in any significant numbers. It's not a problem finding fossils. How do fossils form? They have to be buried quickly. Noah's flood would answer that so easily.
Well, thank you for that answer there, Kent, and thank you for the question there, Sean. Jackson, go ahead. How would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, what was the question again when you put that back up? The flood, I remember.
Sean Mock was asking, were all the layers or most of the layers formed from the flood?
A lot of the layers are formed by floods, but some of the layers can't be formed in water, or some of the layers can't be formed in a rapid type of environment like shale, or alien deposits aren't formed by water at all. And evaporite deposits form slowly through accumulation of material from evaporation, obviously. But so you can't explain all of the layers of the earth in one event. So that's my answer.
All right. Final word there, Kent?
Well, that's what I said, too. I said you can't explain all of them, but nearly all of them formed in one big event, Noah's flood.
I appreciate it, gentlemen. I appreciate the engaging Q&A. Question from Honesty Angel. She's asking, where's my Hawaiian shirt? So I apologize. I guess I didn't get the memo. I feel left out, gentlemen. You guys look good. So we're going to have to wind it down here with this last super chat question. This one comes in from Jungle Jargon, $5 super chat. I appreciate the support, Jungle. He says, Jackson, where did the energy come from? Question mark. To make hydrogen? Question mark.
Well, it's a good question. The true answer is we don't know. It could have been a god. It could have been some natural process. I'm open to either one if the evidence comes out. With the James Webb telescope going up, maybe we'll find some answers that we don't know before. So that's all I have to say.
All right, I appreciate it. Go ahead, Dr. Hovind. Anything you wanted to add?
Well, yeah. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Did it in 6 days, like he said. No reason to change any theology on that. So hydrogen, the evolutionists want to think all of the matter in the universe was in a dot smaller than a period. I challenge you to squeeze a cup of coffee into a dot smaller than a period. You want to put the hydrogen-filled blimp in there? You couldn't get a gallon of milk into a dot. The theory is so stupid that everything fit in a dot. I don't know how a person with one brain cell could believe such a thing. I think they've been duped and deceived. I think it's dumb. But go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Kent. Go ahead, Jackson. Go ahead.
Black holes condense massive amounts of matter into a singularity. There's one black hole with 40 billion solar masses in it, 40 billion suns, the size of a period on a page. Unless you don't believe in black holes, I don't know. But black holes do that. There's a singularity.
Can you show me one of these black holes? I'd like one for my science center here. Bring one
Well,
down to me. I'll pay you $5.
They've been directly imaged with radio telescopes, and they've been observed with gravitational microlensing.
Where did the gravity come from to condense this material? I'd like to see evidence of 40 million suns, square whatever number you gave, squeezed in a period. But I don't think that's true at all. But they're saying the whole universe, everything. Your whole body came from that dot, Jackson. Do you really believe that?
Well, obviously, my body didn't come in its present form. The matter from it did, but yeah.
All right, I appreciate it, guys. You made for a great debate, very cordial, easy to moderate. So I appreciate it. Time flies by as always. It's an hour and a half. We are going to call it here. Again, thank you so much, Jackson and Kent, for giving us your time for tonight's important debate. Does geology support creation or evolution? I want to hand it to you guys, Jackson and Dr. Dino, for some final words before we shut it down. Why don't we start with you, Jackson? Final words, final thoughts, and thanks again for being here.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks, guys, for debating again. This is our third debate. I think it's been our best one. The one I've enjoyed this one the most out of all three, I think. I hope we have more debates, Kent. I enjoy talking to you. Yeah. So, yeah, that's really all I have to say. Thanks for being here.
I appreciate it, Jackson. I appreciate it. Dr. Dino, final words, final thoughts, and thanks again for giving us your time.
Well, the Bible says, don't boast yourself about tomorrow. We don't know we're going to be alive tomorrow. The way the world's going, you can die tonight. I'd like to ask everybody the simple question. If you died today, where would you go? In Jackson's worldview, you go back to molecules and nothing. There's nothing more than the physical in his worldview. I believe there's not only a physical man, a body, I think there's a spirit. I think animals or plants have a body only. Animals have a body and a consciousness of life. And man has a body, a consciousness of life, and a consciousness of God. All things were created by Jesus, and he is worthy to receive the praise for everything he has done. And so I gave my life to him 53 years ago. I said, Lord, I'm a sinner. I'd like you to forgive me and save me. And boy, he did. And he's been living inside of me, trying to make something out of me since then. I give him a hard time once in a while. But I'd like to see him get in you, Jackson. You need to receive Jesus Christ as your Savior before you die. You're in Arkansas. I've been there hundreds of times. You have some idiot drivers in Arkansas. Dumb. You could be killed tonight, tomorrow. Give your heart to the Lord, man. You don't know when it's going to happen. Anyway, thanks so much. Thank you.
Amen. I appreciate it. Well said, Dr. Hovind. Jackson, thank you as well for your concluding statements. That concludes the Hovind versus Rowe debate trilogy. So maybe one day Matt and I will string them all together and make it into a premiere. So anyways, Dr. Dino and Jackson, God bless the both of you. God bless the audience. Thank you for tuning in, and Standing for Truth is out.